In the ever-changing world of healthcare, are you looking to get advice and learn to prepare for healthcare challenges that you may face? Come join a conversation about all things healthcare and wellness with your hosts, Gavin Wiswell, Dr. Guillermo Castillo, and Dr. Mansi Shah.
Welcome to the Healthcare Corner, everyone. And today, as per usual, we have full-strength Healthcare Corner coming to you. So, Guillermo, we've got a wonderful topic. I think an exciting guest, and I'm ready for the show today. How about you?
Yeah, as am I, and I'm excited to have Dr. Shah with us today. You know, you guys don't hear her every single week, but hopefully we can get her here more often. So how are you doing today, Dr. Shah?
I'm doing great. It's such an honor to be here. And Sophia, we're really excited. This topic hits home with me because I come from India and it's our roots. So let's get started.
Absolutely. So the topic, as Dr. Shah mentioned, is yoga. And yoga is something that I think, is spiritual for many over here. It's maybe taught more as a practice and of wellness and health, right? And so really, we're going to talk about all things yoga today. When's it good to start? Who's it for? And everything in between. So let's get to it.
Yeah, yoga to me has been the ultimate personal challenge. So that's what I wanted to focus on. And when we talk to our guest here shortly, we're going to ask her why that is. And really, I see it as a vehicle to have a better quality of life. And for me, a better quality of life means no suffering from physical pain or sometimes emotional trauma, which, can really manifest itself as really physical symptoms. So as I recently experienced, you guys may have heard last week. So without further ado, let's bring in our guest. Her name is Sophia De Silva. I know her as Sophie because, she's one of the people I learn a lot from on a regular basis. And Sophie's been teaching and facilitating yoga since 2009. She's really passionate about utilizing the practice of yoga and mindfulness to develop character, well-being, and leadership. She combines the wisdom of leadership and yoga into delivering classes, trainings, and programs that teach yoga as a discipline of self-examination towards embodying authenticity. That's a lot, right, when you hear that, but it's all absolutely true about her. I can attest to that. She's driven by her love to create spaces from human beings to become their potential, embodying well-being and wisdom. She also earned her MA in leadership from U.S.D. and her ERYT, or Experienced Registered Yoga Teacher, and has over 10,000 hours of actually teaching the practice. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Sophie.
What an introduction. Thank you so much, Guillermo. It is an honor to be with all of you. And it's a lot to sit through to listen to your own introduction, but I appreciate you. I appreciate you sharing.
We just scratched the surface there. She goes a lot deeper than all this, but I really appreciate you, Sophie. So I'm excited to have you because we focus here a lot on well-being and how do we really create a better quality of life? How do people choose better practices? And for us, I think to get started, we really would love to know, your leadership and yoga. Why? How did you get into this? And what was that evolution for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So. The evolution for me is I come from a background of I grew up in athletics. So I grew up as an athlete. I started swimming when I was competitively swimming when I was 7 years old. And so, as you know, if you've done any kind of competitive sport, it becomes such a big part of your identity. All throughout your young adult, and then I did it into early college years, and then it just ended, And so I've been very, very fortunate to I met a mentor very early on in my formative years. I was 18 when I met him, and he introduced me. He was the invitation into yoga, and yoga kind of acted as a bridge for me. It helped bridge the new world I was in, this new world of navigating, like not being an athlete, and gave me a practice to help me navigate more of like my interior nature. But it was through a familiar way of doing things, which was through my body, right? Swimming, obviously you need water to swim, but with yoga, the poses, the breath, and my first experience of yoga was that Bikram style, hot style yoga was my first ever yoga class. And so through that experience, I began to really, my personal story there is that I not only loved how I felt physically, but the biggest takeaway from me whenever I went to a yoga practice was the clarity of my mind and how it helped bring a sense of peace and harmony to my interior nature. And so that just became a great love. I just developed a strong relationship with the practice of yoga, and I call myself a practitioner of yoga. I practice and practice and practice. And as I started to navigate my professional career, I became really interested. I've always been very interested in human potential. And what I became most interested in is that the consulting company, we worked a lot on the outer structures, but there was some very obvious, like the CEO of the company, we never dealt with the culture. We never dealt with like the internal structures, and there was no coaching done on the person themselves, and their, business was in disarray. And so I became really fascinated in that component of like, how do we nurture human potential? Like, how do you help people live more optimally? I believe that we can have, a fruitful and, outer experience as well as a fruitful inner experience. And so I pursued this degree in leadership because I think leadership is such a fascinating, study, body of study. And at that time, I really saw how much the practice of yoga was a wonderful tool for helping to develop and nurture potential. It kind of, to me, just went hand in hand. I thought, leaders need a practice. Human beings, bottom line to me, I thought human beings need a practice that can help them, prepare them for not only the rigors of, our vocational lives, but really how to prepare us for the rigors of just life itself. And I spent most of my time in my master's program over at U.S.D. kind of looking at how I could bring these two worlds together.
Yeah, I agree with you. One of the biggest things for me has been discipline, and when you say a practice, to me, that's something that you do every day, right? So that, incorporates a discipline. So you have to be disciplined in order to really do something day after day and make it part of your routine, So, but on the other end of that, how does teaching yoga help you be better?
Well, what it has really done the most for me, so one, I completely agree, practice and discipline, and it's, self-discipline is one of the core canonical virtues. The Greeks really taught the importance of self-discipline as a way to improve oneself, one's character. So 100% practice and self-discipline are synonymous. But teaching yoga for me, so going back to that, when I worked for this consulting company, it was hard for me to reconcile how people talk the talk, but they didn't walk the walk. And so teaching yoga for me has been a practice that has really increased that accountability measure of not just talking the talk, but really trying to build my life in a way that reflects that, so that I am actually embodying what it is that I'm speaking of. So that definitely ups the ante in everyday living choices. But it's been really good, and I feel so grateful, especially during this time, that we're all, moving through to have the tools that yoga has provided, and even leadership has provided, in order to navigate it with a little bit more clarity and peace and authenticity.
Yeah, I can vouch for you. Every time I've been in your classes, I get the sense that you are the embodiment of exactly what you're speaking of. And that's what makes it, really rich and really meaningful, at least when I've been with you. And I've taken other yoga classes, and, there's been, I think people utilize it in so many different ways. But the key is, like you said, it's to be a practice, to make it a discipline, so that you can evolve and help yourself, and not just your body, but to also, spiritually. I think when you really understand how we talk about here, so if you ever listen to our show, you'll hear that we talk a lot about balance. So for me, it's imbalance, and as I told you last week, I was hurting last week. So my back, to me, and funny enough, I thought I had heard it in your class in yoga, but it turns out it wasn't. I think that was just where the symptoms began. but I definitely was just out of balance. So this is something that I've committed now. We talk here about commitments a lot. I've committed now to making yoga a discipline that I will practice every single day.
Yeah, and I think you bring up such a valuable point. Is that so? For many, right? When we think of yoga, we just think of that one component, which is the movement component of it, and Dr. Monse, who I think is who's on the show with us today, can vouch to this. Is that like yoga is so much more, right? So, but the most familiar way. Go ahead.
I always tell Sophia to my clients that your daily practice is your strongest practice. You don't have to get into the whole posture thing, and don't get hung up on all these things. Just do a 15 to 20 minute daily thing. That's the strongest thing you can do for your body with yoga.
Yes, and that's the thing, is that I think it's important. So when I speak of yoga, I'm speaking of classical, the classical yoga and the evolution of the classical yoga practice as put out by Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, right? Patanjali's Classical Yoga Sutras. And Guillermo, like in that body of, and I've spent some time with a wonderful teacher local here in San Diego who's really helped me deepen my understanding of what the classical yoga intends to do for somebody. And to Dr. Manzi's point is that it's intended to help people build this discipline and this practice, to have this daily practice. But you bring up this valuable point. Whatever your passive life is, however we don't move and do move, if we have certain ways of moving and not moving. And so you can, if you don't practice regularly and you come to a yoga class and you have really tight hips, you do one error, one move that can throw off balance in the whole system.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what happens. So, we've talking a lot, and we're really getting into it here with Sophie and Sophia De Silva. So when we come back from the break, please don't go anywhere, because we're going to find out exactly, define what is yoga, because we hear this term a lot, but some of us may not know exactly what we're talking about. So stay tuned.
To learn more about being a guest on the show or to ask a host a question, go to hcshow.net or email the show at info@hcshow.net to get your questions answered on the Healthcare Corner. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Healthcare Corner with Gavin Wiswell, Dr. Guillermo Castillo, and Dr. Mansi Shah. Welcome back to Healthcare Corner, where you're a part of the conversation with your hosts, Gavin Wiswell, Dr. Guillermo Castillo, and Dr. Mansi Shah.
Welcome back to the Healthcare Corner, everybody. And today we're talking about yoga with Sophia De Silva, Dr. Shah, Guillermo, and I, and asking the question, is yoga the ultimate personal challenge? And we've had a lot of doctors here on the show, Guillermo and Mansi, and I've heard them say that, when you talk about being a doctor, they talk about practicing medicine, not doing medicine, because it seems to me that medicine is always an expanding art. It's kind of art and science together. It's your left brain and your right brain, and you're constantly a student of the human body and the changes that happen there. And when Sophia was talking earlier, she mentioned practice of yoga, and so I was wondering if there were similarities there, and maybe that's a good way for us to maybe define what yoga is.
Yeah, and I think maybe that's a good way to bring back in and start this segment is maybe on your end, Sophie, defines what is yoga, just so we're all on the same page.
Yeah, I love that. I love the similarity there between medicine and being a practitioner of medicine and being a practitioner of yoga. So the definition, according to classical yoga, is increasing our awareness. Yoga is increasing our awareness of what we're doing when we're doing it. That is the definition of yoga. Now, I want to stress that it's that is just the beginning, right? It is a set of practices, right, to help us increase our awareness of what we're doing when we're doing. So yoga is truly a practice to help us develop, first and foremost, it's a practice of the mind, for the mind.
Sounds to me almost like being in the moment, and we hear this all the time, especially in these times where people are really anxious and really anticipating, what's coming or not knowing what's coming, and fearful of what they've already experienced. So, being aware of what you're doing while you're doing it, that sounds like, to me, like no better than being in the moment. And if that's what it is, then to me, that's phenomenal. I mean, that's my goal every day.
Correct. And it's so, I was listening, there's a great podcast for anybody who is interested. It's called Yoga Land, and it is done really well. And there's a great, well-known yoga teacher that talks about the core of yoga. Like if you were to remove like the core of something, for example, I taught a class the other day to a group of high school athletes, soccer players, women soccer players. And I asked them that question. I'm like, if I took away soccer, the soccer ball, would that be soccer? No, we need a soccer ball to play soccer. And so yoga is the same way, is the core of yoga. If you take away essentially that mindfulness piece, that awareness piece, you take away what yoga truly, at its core, at its essence. I think that's the word of Dr. Monse that she said, that's what it really, we lose that. So the heart of yoga, the essence of it, the core of it, all those words, is that awareness piece.
So why so I mean, when you say that, like, it's just increasing your awareness of what you're doing while you are doing it. So to me, that means that physically it doesn't really matter what you were doing, correct? So you could be, like you said, playing soccer, and if you're mindfully aware of what you're doing, could that then be considered? Are you practicing yoga while you're playing a sport, for example?
Yeah, I feel like that could get controversial. I would say, I would say, there's more to that definition, in that one of the ways we can explore increasing our awareness is through different ways of being. So in some ways I would say yes to your question, Guillermo. In some ways I would say no, but I would say yes. Anytime you are fully present, there is that union that you experience, that sense of oneness. There's that beautiful quote that time meets eternity in the present moment. That present moment awareness is what a yoga practitioner would describe as a yogic moment. However, I don't want to deduce and really, reduce yoga down to just that, because I feel it wouldn't do it justice, and it takes away from the sort of how dynamic and wonderful it is. But I will say one thing that I think is really important to stress here is yoga has innovated over thousands and thousands and thousands of years, right? And it's Iyengar, one of the great teachers of our body of work, has said that it's needed to innovate in order to stay alive, right? In order to continue to be this art and this science and this practice. And it's innovated to this place where it's supposed to support us in our everyday world of action. So it is many, there are many components to it, but I just wanted to stress in its purest essence, if we were to remove that definition, that part of like increasing your awareness of what you're doing when you're doing it, we would remove the yoga.
Yeah. See, at least for me, Sophie, when I've been with you and I've been practicing, there's always in that moment when you're there, you're really focused on just being there, and you always have us guide us through, breath work and being able to, feel every joint, every muscle, every fiber, and every sound around you, and just whatever's happening for you in that moment. And I think maybe that's the difference in life. It's really difficult to do that because there's so much stimulus coming from every different direction. And, when you actually take the time to focus on just a few things, maybe is that, when I'm practicing yoga, I kind of forget about, everything external of what's happening there. And maybe that's the difference. But, that really shows me how yoga mirrors life. So from your perspective, how do you think yoga really mirrors life, and in which ways, and why is that important?
Yeah, I love that. Well, I think, so like, I would say that it's more that what you're describing there is another, so going back to the classical Yoga Sutras, it lays out, there's 4 chapters, and it lays out this kind of very systematic 195 aphorisms of this practice of yoga. And the first chapter kind of says, this is what yoga is really about. This is what's possible when you have yoga in your life. The second chapter really goes into, but this is life. And life is very complex, and it's full of these trials, and it's full of these tribulations and everything in between. And what you described, that when you have a discipline and you can take yourself to that discipline, whether it's moving your body mindfully for 15 minutes, moving your body mindfully for 45 hours, whatever the time allows you to do, or just sitting and breathing. What you're also practicing, or what you're invited to practice, is to actually detach a little bit from the outside world, from the loudness and the busyness and that frenetic and all the identities and roles and to-do lists and everything that's demanding at your very being. You're invited to sort of just a little detachment, a very healthy sense of detachment, so that you can go inward, and you're working towards that interoception, right? That awareness of okay, how is my breath? How's my body feeling? Wow, my shoulders are really high up next to my ears. I need to drop them down. Wow, I'm clenching my jaw, right? So you start to have this dialogue with parts of yourself that normally, when you're just moving through life and you're multitasking, we kind of, in some ways, neglect, right? And for however long you have, you're just given that opportunity to almost, I always say, come back home, right? So that you come back to this place of symmetry and you have an awareness of wow, okay, now I can relax my shoulders. Now I can take a deeper breath. And those practices of both coming into the moment, right? Using your mind to come into the awareness of the moment, and then being able to have that dialogue with your body and detach a little bit from the loudness of the outside world, it resets everything, right? It nourishes the nervous system, and I'm sure you guys are the professionals. You could speak more on sort of the biology that happens there. So I don't know if that totally answered. It doesn't necessarily mirror life. I feel like it's more like of a complement to life.
And I think you're so right with that, Sophia. We really have had a breadth of different knowledge and background and experience here, and so many things in medicine, Western and Eastern, seem to be complementing of each other. And Guillermo has said it since day one, comes down to balance and sleep, exercise, what we eat. And I think as we've continued this conversation here on the Healthcare Corner, we get to kind of like an onion, peel back these layers of what is beneficial. And I think every person's ability to improve their life, their mindset, is enhanced by all these different opportunities out there. Before we go into the break, I did want to ask Dr. Shah a question. For some of us that are less in tune or understanding of yoga and maybe psychology, like when we're talking about soccer and maybe sports psychology, we know that being mindful, understanding the game, who we are, these different types of situations, is there any similarity, really briefly, with psychology and psychiatry, maybe with yoga, or not? And maybe we could tease that out a little bit, where Eastern and Western medicine kind of come together. So, Monse, I'd love your thoughts on that topic.
Absolutely. Sophia is a wealth of information here, and I have my own way of looking at it because I grew up with it. When I was 7 years old, my grandpa taught me how to start doing yoga and breathing. So we keep it simple, very simple. Of course, there is psychology involved in it. And the whole definition of how we look at it is daily practice, breathing as an essence of it. And then, of course, it has to be being in the present moment. That's all yoga is about. And then, of course, when you go into the therapeutic mode with Iyengar yoga, you could even call him Dr. Iyengar, because he is the most amazing guru we have in yoga. I actually practice Iyengar yoga at my holistic lifestyle sanctuary, and we've helped so many people. So honestly, keeping it to three things, which is, being present, focus on your breathing, and not get caught up in, your mind wandering all the time is so, yeah, I guess it's, even if you think about sports, you have to stay so laser focused and be in the present moment to get the goals and the results you're looking for, right? So there is, of course, similarities between it, but to keep it really, really easy and simple to understand is, honestly, I'll say your daily practice is your strongest practice, and focusing whatever time that you practice, focus on the present moment with breathing and keep it that way and keep doing it. Your body's going to benefit tremendously from that.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. I just recently read this book, and it's called Be Exceptional. And it focuses about a bunch of different principles to help you be an exceptional person. One of those is mastering yourself. And I believe that, at least from my perspective, yoga plays a role in helping you master yourself. And at least it does for me when I'm really sitting there struggling to figure out how I can just master a hip or a shoulder. So maybe one piece at a time, but it is about that. And we're talking about really complex, mentally psychological, situations here. But I think as we come back from the break, we'll be able to really get into how does yoga really help us literal people? How yoga can help everyday people just be a little bit better and talk about their well-being specifically for each individual. So stay tuned.
To learn more about being a guest on the show or to ask a host a question, go to hcshow.net or email the show at info@hcshow.net to get your questions answered on the Healthcare Corner. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Healthcare Corner with Gavin Wiswell, Dr. Guillermo Castillo, and Dr. Mansi Shah. Welcome back to Healthcare Corner, where you're a part of the conversation with your host, Gavin Wiswell, Dr. Guillermo Castillo, and Dr. Mansi Shah.
Welcome back to the Healthcare Corner, everyone. And today we are talking about yoga and wellness and well-being and tying that all together. But we wouldn't be able to have these great conversations and these topics if it weren't for our sponsors. So this segment of the show is brought to you by Vertera Health, our friends that keep the human touch in virtual healthcare. They specialize in remote patient monitoring for both mental and physical health. And so you can contact them at 855-745-8400 or visit their website at verterahealth.com. And so it's something that understanding, from my perspective, from a healthcare perspective and an operator, you see people with debilitating and chronic disease and illness. And so I think Guillermo's question at the end of the break was really poignant. It was, how can we help everyday people just understand the benefits of yoga, and then how do they know it's helping? So many times when we exercise, we go to the point of pain. We maybe strain too hard. We do exercises that aren't helpful for whatever goals that we have, wellness goals that we have. So maybe for our audience that is less versed than you three on the show, help us to understand, how's it helping, right, Guillermo?
Yeah, Sophie, maybe give us an idea of, how does it help everyday people, and how do they measure that it's helping?
Oh man, such a I could spend hours on this topic. But to bring it down, I think quite simply is I always say that I think there's multiple levels, right? There's the physical level, there's the emotional level, the mental level, and then the I would say the emotional and psychological are intertwined. But simply, we know the benefits of, to use Dr. Mansi's words, like a daily practice. We know that, for example, movement is good for our overall well-being. In yoga, we say it not only enhances, the muscles and the bones and the skeletal system, but it helps with the nervous system. It helps tone the nervous system. I do think it's really important that people seek out the right type of yoga movement that's right for where they are and in their lifetime, or where they are in their life journey. And I think I had a dear friend the other day say to me, and keep in mind, this person found the practice of yoga much later in their life. They're in their later 40s. They always grew up in some sort of movement practice, weightlifting, cycling, all these things, but came into the practice of yoga much later. And they've been going through a very transformative time, especially since about 2019 until now, they've been going through a lot of change, a lot of transformation, dealing with a lot of big stressors in their life. And they shared with me that they went to a yoga practice, and they said their words were, I didn't have any pain, physical pain or even emotional pain. And they were just like, it was a new experience for me. I've never gone to a yoga class where like there wasn't an emotional pain. And my mentors always said, you can believe that if somebody's walking into a yoga studio, there is some degree of pain, whether it be physically, emotionally, or psychologically. And so I think that's the litmus test, is you start to see that in your everyday world of actions, perhaps you find that you don't have that as much. It's not as strong. It's not as present in your life, whether it be physically in your body or psychologically and emotionally. Not that, I want to make a disclaimer here, not that it is a substitute for support psychologically, physically, and emotionally.
No, I think you bring up a good point. And at least in my personal experience, when I'm there, and sometimes, that physical stretch does initiate some emotional response. And sometimes it's not, I've realized that it's not directly related to what I'm doing in that moment, but for some reason, obviously we know that the mind is connected to the body, right? So there is sometimes that there's like certain physical situations that do trigger emotional responses. And, for whatever reason, we don't always put them together because we're obviously not open to them. I believe that our ego blocks those because we don't want to face those uncomfortable truths many a times. So for me, at least, when I'm doing yoga, when I'm doing meditation, I have those similar types of reactions. And, being able to get there is a huge transformation. But I'm not so sure that I've been able to connect, hey, I'm actually improved. When am I actually improving? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for you, like quite literally for you, if it's okay to share, like Guillermo has very tight hips, right? So there's a lot there. I love the field of study. Yoga therapy is a whole. There's an international association of yoga therapists now that is a huge governing body there that's trying to really bring that yoga therapy more to the forefront. But for example, if you were to work with a yoga therapist, they would be working with you in multiple modalities and giving you specific physical practices, breath practices, study like reading and inquiry to help you not only treat what you may have. The tightness of your hips is not just because perhaps you sit a long time or you do a lot of squats or you do a lot of lunges. The tightness of the hips can be there can be multiple factors contributing to that. So for you, how you would know, right, is the freedom you would feel more in your body as we start to work more on helping to create a little bit more openness in that part of your body. So, the hips are a complex part of the body. So it's not just one thing that's going to fix it. But I would say as you start to practice more regularly, do you feel just more free in your everyday movement life, right? Just walking and just, even driving in the car. I always say especially when I work with people one-on-one, the great test of a great yoga practice is how you feel the next day, right? During, it can be pretty painful, but I think it's navigating. I want to use that. I should say that with discretion there, but like what I mean is that, I always say when we move physically in yoga, you want a delicious discomfort. We never want to move into a range of, where we would say, oh my goodness, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get out of this pose, right? We want to stay in that delicious discomfort.
Sophia, I love that analogy because we've talked a lot about movement and exercise on past shows and discomfort. And so that being delicious, I think, maybe I'm hungry. I don't know what, but great analogy.
Knowing the difference between being injured and just being a little sore and achy is huge.
So calorically, right, you're looking at, the average yoga class saying, maybe burning between 180 calories to maybe 600 for hot yoga or something like that. So as a yoga practitioner, is this something that some people, because of their mobility, they don't, can't get on a treadmill or maybe a bike or run, 5 miles a day? So is yoga a replacement for those people to get those kind of gains that maybe we're talking about here? Or?
So calorically, it's said that from metabolic, like actually trying to actually increase that metabolic rate, that the practice of yoga never really gets you up into those high ranges where you're burning fat, let's say. But it depends, right? I have had students over the years that have utilized yoga as a replacement to, let's say, running, and have practiced hot in a heated room with a more rigorous, let's say, like a power type practice, right? A power heated yoga, and did lose a lot of weight that then freed them up to be able to explore different types of movement. But it depends on the student in large part.
Got it. Thank you.
And of course, diet and all that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like you said, yoga could be a whole bunch of different things. So that's why, for us, it's really important to kind of let our audience know that, we're promoting this because it's like you said, it's a very additive and an addition to what we already practice when it comes to Western medicine, all the things that we talk about here, Sophie. So we talk a lot. We promote every single time we're on the show. We say, look, the way to better life is really eating better, sleeping better, and hydration and being in balance overall, and figuring out what that means for you as an individual. So for us, the purpose of bringing you on was to really show that, hey, there's another alternative, and sometimes it's really hard to focus or to very difficult. And when I say hard, I mean difficult for certain people. Like specifically, I'm talking about myself, to focus on like one aspect that I know already hurts. So for me, like like you said, my hips are physically tight, and it's almost embarrassing. And I, as a big, strong guy, it's like, it's almost shameful to admit that I have such a weakness, and that it's debilitating. And that sometimes I feel like I'm like exactly like what I said, that I'm just a weak guy, and that's not truly the case. So, figuring out how to focus on a different practice and implementing, and then using those skills that you gain from like a yoga practice. And then having those translate across different, specifically spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and looking at yourself in a different way, for me is the most transformative thing, and the most beneficial thing that I've gotten from such a practice.
Yeah, and what's so interesting about what you said, Guillermo? Thank you for sharing that. Is that it's so flexibility? A lot of times people are, you say, oh yeah, I teach yoga. They're like, oh, I tried that once. I'm not good at that. Or I tried that and I'm just not flexible. And it's so funny to me because it's the whole point of a physical yoga practice, an asana practice, is to help increase your flexibility, right? Like that, they say that when it comes to our overall constitution, it is said flexibility is an enormous part of our body's health, especially as we age. And so, the point of yoga, the asana practice, I wanted to share this. So, the physical postures came out of the Hatha yogis. And the reason that they discovered the movement part of the practice, which came much later on, was because they were sitting for long periods of time, meditating, and they were really trying to contemplating, the true nature of reality. And they found by sitting for too long that the body actually started to deteriorate. And so they were like, oh no, we got to start moving. We got to actually strengthen this form, this being, right? Yeah. And so that's how the poses started to come about. The definition of flexibility is to bend without breaking. Yeah. To bend without breaking. And so what's interesting about what you share is, one, I want to say, I'm for the belief that shown a weakness to offer that gratitude to that weakness, because now you know what you got to work on, right? So we all have them. We all have a weakness in some capacity. But two, it's like it's nothing that a discipline and a little bit shift in focus and a little bit shift in your routine to bring balance to your overall well-being.
Yeah. So, you've just heard how yoga mirrors our metabolic and spiritual self. So really stay tuned so we can get back into the different types of yoga, who's it for, how we get started, and wrap this up with some great tips on how you can get started tomorrow.
To learn more about being a guest on the show or to ask a host a question, go to hcshow.net or email the show at info@hcshow.net to get your questions answered on the Healthcare Corner. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Healthcare Corner with Gavin Wiswell, Dr. Guillermo Castillo, and Dr. Mansi Shah. Welcome back to Healthcare Corner, where you're a part of the conversation with your hosts, Gavin Wiswell, Dr. Guillermo Castillo, and Dr. Mansi Shah.
Well, this is always the toughest part of the show, where we've got so much to continue to talk about, Mansi and Guillermo, right? That we've just had an action-packed show with so much information. And so really, in this last segment, we're going to try to find out who yoga is really for and really get down to those things that we can do to either get started with yoga or improve that yoga practice. But before we do, Sophia, it's been an honor to have you on our show, and we'd love to let our audience know how they can get a hold of you and maybe be your next students in your next class. So would you be able to share with our audience how to get a hold of you?
Yeah, I'm not totally fully active. I probably don't post nearly as much as everybody wants me to post, but that's because I'm like deep in my work. I want everybody to know that, right? I'm out here like doing the work, and I'm not one for like, just bells and whistles. So, but Instagram, of course, I'm my company is called Om Yoga Club. It's Om with 3 M's and yogaclub.com. That's my website. That's also our Instagram. And then my personal Instagram is Soph_A. And yeah, I'm happy to have anybody. We have a free first class, so anybody can come out and join us. We have outdoor classes and virtual classes.
Yeah. So, Sophie, before actually in the beginning of the show, you mentioned how you initially got started with Bikram yoga, or the hot yoga. And like I said, I've done yoga before, specifically hot yoga, and I've had some pretty interesting experiences there where I was a bit delirious and wanted to scream and run out panicking, in a full-on panic. But I'd look around and everybody seemed very calm and at peace. So I figured it was just me and it was all in my head. But, I still, to this day, don't really understand. What's the real benefit between, just doing, like, say, room temperature or outdoor yoga or whatever the temperature is versus, getting up to 105 to 108 degrees?
Yeah, so it's a hot topic of conversation. So the idea here is that the intensity that the Bikram style yoga provides. So it is a set sequence. It's 26 postures. It's taught in a room that is over 100 degrees. I don't know the specific degrees. I want to say it's 105, but don't quote me. So the intensity so we build heat with 2 ways. So there's the passive heat and then there's active heat. So one is the heat that's injected into the room, and the other is the heat that you generate with your breath. The Bikram series is very intense. It's 90 minutes. You can go anywhere in the world. You do it here in San Diego. They have a script. They teach it the same way in Japan. They teach it the same way in Spain. They teach it the same way. So the value of that is it builds discipline. Most of us, again, going back to how we started this conversation, yoga is a practice that's to help us develop the mind, right? Discipline begins in our mind, first and foremost, and then we use the body to help strengthen that discipline. So the value of a set sequence practice is that it teaches that discipline. And to your point, Guillermo, it does it in kind of like a kick your butt kind of way, like I don't think I can do this and I'm going to lose my mind type of way. Now, I don't think it's for everybody. And if you have like blood pressure issues, if you have like those, I would caution those people. I don't believe that that's the state that everybody's entry point needs to be through that style of yoga. I think it's important to really, I tell people, try everything. Try Iyengar, try Vinyasa, try Ashtanga, try hot style yoga, try everything and you will find what supports you. For my wiser students, those that are a little bit, later in their life, like 40, 50, 60, I really encourage working one-on-one with a yoga teacher, somebody who has a lot of experience and is well-versed. Having one-on-one sessions is extremely valuable because they can really help customize and tailor the experience so that you can feel more comfortable going into a group class when you're ready for that. That's
great. Yeah, Sophie, and just for our listeners out there, who is yoga for? Like you said, is it really for everybody? Can kids, men, seniors, and at what age is the best time to start a practice?
Yeah, I really believe so. Classical yoga is the more I study the text, the more I'm blown away about how truly universal it is. It really has something for everyone. I believe that with every ounce of my being. So I think what's important is interest, interest, desire, inspiration. There's wonderful, I know here in San Diego, there's a studio called If I Was a Bird Yoga. That's for kids. There's the Silver Sneakers program that's for seniors. They do a lot of chair yoga. There really is something for everybody, but I think what I want to stress here is really important to find what it is within yoga that really serves you at this time in your life. And I'm happy to be a resource to help people guide that. That's one of my favorite things to do is I'm really looking to get into yoga, but I just had back surgery. I would not send that person to a hot yoga class, right? I would not send that person to a vinyasa class. So I really like to help customize that for people.
So I think you bring up a great point. So some statistics I saw online, Sophie, were that over 80% of the people that practice yoga are women. And so
they all wear Lululemon.
And they all wear Lululemon. So if I don't look good in Lululemon, right, what's the bump there? How do we, get rid of some of those ideas and say, yeah, for seniors, for children, for men especially, right, for flexibility, so many great reasons. How do we advocate and get that message out, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I have to give a shout out to Lululemon because I am an ambassador for them and I love them and they do make great clothes. But
100%,
yes, it is.
Sophie, not to interrupt, but they don't make anything that Gavin and I would look good in, though.
Yeah. Even meggings. I don't think they have meggings for us. Yeah.
That's right. They do.
That'll be our next show. Our next show will be Todd shaking his head at us right now. So.
I am willing to, I'm going to set up a fit session for you guys and I will change your mind on that.
All right. I'm looking forward to that.
Excellent. We'll live stream that, right, Guillermo? Yeah, absolutely. So no, but continue. Yeah, we only a couple of minutes left, so please, we'll get back to the important stuff.
Gavin, so you were saying, so what's so interesting about those statistics is there was a time when yoga was not available to women, right? It was not, it was a practice primarily practiced by, men and there's a lot there with the caste system. And in any case, it's very interesting to see again how it's evolved and how it's innovated. And I don't have an answer to you of what it is about yoga that is more attractive, why the population is more women focused. I don't have an intelligent answer there, but it is intended, like I said, for everybody. And what I really speak, what I think is important is that people resonate with the teacher and resonate with the style. And it's important to especially here in San Diego, we're so lucky to have so many wonderful, wonderful teachers and practitioners, and everybody has their own unique expression that they bring to the canon, the teaching, the education of yoga.
I think that's great. And like you said, I mean, this is a practice of yoga, so we didn't expect for you to have all the answers, but we're going to continue to search on those things. And I think just as we have a couple minutes left, Monsi and Sophie, if you can both think of 3 things that we can tell our audience about how to get started, how to take that worry about, maybe what is yoga and put it into practice. I think, what I've learned from this episode is that you taking your leadership background and then also your love for yoga and combining those things so that you're leading by example for those that you teach. What 3 things could we maybe quickly in the next couple of minutes share with our audience, do you think?
I would say to start with, I'm going to hand it over to Sophia in a second, but our audience should really focus on taking the myth out that I'm not flexible to do yoga. Yoga is not about being flexible. Yoga is about being present, and then with time, you become flexible, and that's your progress note. That's the delta you see. So that's, how Sophia said that evaluating what practice is good for you is what you need a coach for to at least get that information where to get started so you don't quickly fall out of that. And then I would hand it over to Sophia as a yoga expert, what she would want to add to that.
Yes, I love that. I love what you just said, 100%. Thank you for saying that, Dr. Muncie. So remind me, you want 2 more.
What are just tips that you could give our audience that, maybe are been hesitant and, it's like, man, how do I get started? What can they do tomorrow to be better than today when it comes to yoga?
So interesting fact, the place that people begin their practice yoga is at home. Second place they go to is a gym. Third place they go to is a yoga studio. So what I recommend is an unbelievable amount of free resources out there. I'm happy to give people resources. They could come to my website, but you could literally start at home with YouTubing a yoga practice on YouTube, yoga with Adrienne. She's certainly exploded over the years. I think Om Yoga Club has a couple of classes up on YouTube. The Mirror, which is a great app. It's very, very basic. Just starting somewhere. Just start somewhere. And having a growth mindset of, okay, this is not about being good at it. It's just about doing it. It's like your medicine, right? Doctor gives you that prescription, you take that medicine. Starting somewhere, that daily practice is your medicine. So start at home with a simple practice that you can find online. And then my third would be, I don't know. My third would be community, I guess, finding like-minded people to join you in that journey.
Those are phenomenal. And really thank you, Sophie, for being on the show today. And hopefully our listeners today, found that yoga is the ultimate personal challenge for all those reasons that we just spoke about, but that it could also be a vehicle to a better quality of life. And that, I learned that I don't have to be so flexible and that my weakness could actually be turned into my strength if I make this a discipline and practice and share with people like Sophie and Dr. Shah and even Gavin here, who we're going to be, fitted, and we're going to get into some Lululemons and then start practicing yoga.
Bring on the Meggings. Absolutely.
But also, I hope that our audience learn that, that the body is a mirror for our metabolic and spiritual selves, and that we can, we can really use yoga to help us really get in shape from the inside out. Because we're always very physical. We're always trying to figure out how to look better. But most of us aren't taking the chance to really understand how we can work from the inside and really get physically well, metabolically, emotionally, spiritually. And that will reflect on our skin and our smile. So I loved it. Thank you, Sophie. And we'll see you back here soon, I hope. And thanks, Dr. Shah.
Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And what a phenomenal episode.
To learn more about being a guest on the show or to ask a host a question, go to hcshow.net or email the show at info@hcshow.net to get your questions answered on the Healthcare Corner with Gavin Wiswell, Dr. Guillermo Castillo, and Dr. Mansi Shah.